Hey everyone, welcome back to my beginner PVM series. In this video we're going to take a look at Normal Mode Kerapac, the first of the Elder God Wars bosses. As with the rest of my series, this guide is designed to be both beginner and Ironman friendly, and the methods I'll discuss will reflect that. So if you're struggling to kill the boss, and you want to get your first few kills, this guide is for you. Please note though that I will not be covering hard mode in this guide. Normal Mode Kerapac can be a challenging boss for beginner and intermediate PVMers, and is generally considered to be more difficult than God Wars 2 bosses, but maybe a little bit less difficult than Araxor or Rakshan. The boss can be fought in solos, duos, or trios. As the loot is shared between players, you get better chances of drops in solo mode, and solo mode will be my focus here. With the rest of the guide I will cover how to get there, requirements and recommendations, example gear and inventory setups, all the mechanics from each of the phases, a full kill run through to bring everything together, a small section on an item called the Pontifex Shadow Ring, which provides a variety of minor buffs in the Elder God Wars dungeon, and at the very end I'll cover Kerapac's drop table in normal mode. I'll have timestamps in the description that link to each of these sections, as well as lots of helpful links to the wiki for gear, items, and stuff like that. Let's talk about getting to Kerapac. Kerapac is located in the Elder God Wars dungeon, part of the ruined city of Centiston, specifically in the node on front. There are a lot of ways to get here, but I'll cover just a couple of the common ones. If you've completed the archaeology tutorial, then you will have the archaeology journal, which provides unlimited teleports to the archaeology guild. From here, it's a short run up to Centiston as shown in this clip. It's then a slightly longer run through the cathedral to the node on front and the boss arena. If you've completed the City of Centiston quest, then you'll have the Pontifex Shadow Ring, which provides unlimited teleports to Centiston Cathedral. You can then follow the same route as in the previous clip, just skipping out the first half. The Pontifex Shadow Ring and all its enhancements also grant some other benefits we'll discuss later. After your first kill, you can attune a boss portal in War's Retreat to go straight to Kerapac's instance. This is by far the best method if you can do it, as attuning a boss portal costs 100k, roughly 10% of the average value of a single kill at Kerapac, and it will save you a lot of time in the long run. Next up, requirements. Kerapac technically has no requirements, but he is a difficult multi-phase boss. I would recommend at least the following. Level 85 in your chosen combat style, melee, range, or magic. At least level 70 prayer with the pious prayers unlocked. Tier 95 and ancient curses are a bonus, but not essential. Access to overloads, which require 96 herb lore, but this can be boosted. Access to invention. There's no specific perk that's required, but general purpose PVM perks will boost your DPS and tankiness. Please note that these above are not requirements, and you can definitely beat Kerapac without these, but it's what I'd recommend for a smooth learning experience. Like with most mid to late game bosses, understanding and learning the mechanics is much more important than having stats or gear. Also, this is assuming you're fighting Kerapac as a solo player. In duos or trios, you can get away with lower stats and worse gear. On the subject of gear, let's cover some example setups. You can kill Kerapac with any combat style, and you can use whatever you're comfortable with. For beginners, I would recommend either magic, so you can use Animate Dead, or melee, so you can use a Scrimshaw or Vampirism. In my clips, I'll be using melee. For my weapon, I'm bringing a Dragon Rider Lance from God Wars 2. In general, I wouldn't downgrade below tier 80 accuracy, as otherwise you might struggle to get 100% hit chance, even using the Berserker Aura variants. For armor, I have full Bandos with basic invention perks. If you're using magic and Animate Dead, then I'd suggest something like Ganodermic armor. Kerapac can be poisoned, so Cinderbanes are a good option if you have them. In my next slot, I have a Reaper necklace, but just take your best DPS amulet. In my ring slot, I have the enriched Pontifex Shadow Ring, which is a quest reward. This ring gives some bonuses at Kerapac, which I will discuss later. In my pocket slot, I have a Scrimshaw of Vampirism. The Scrimshaw of Vampirism is fantastic, I think, if you're learning with melee. I would strongly recommend it. If you're using mage or range and you can't take the Scrimshaw, you could take a different Scrimshaw or maybe a Godbook or Scripture. For my aura, I'm using the Berserker Aura. The Berserker Aura and the magic and ranged equivalents are fantastic, because they boost both your damage and your accuracy, which more than make up your decreased defense. If you don't have this aura, you can take an accuracy aura, dark magic aura, or vampirism aura, but these are substantial downgrades. If you're using ranged or magic without Animate Dead, you can generally swap out the gear I have for the exact equivalent item for the style you're using. For example, you can swap out the Bandos armor for Armadyl armor, and the Dragon Rider lance for Shadow Blades. Again, please don't obsess over the exact equipment here. Other than the Pontifex Shadow Ring, which provides some minor buffs, everything else is just generic PvM gear. Bring what you have, and focus on learning the boss mechanics. Finally, Kerapac counts as a node-on Dragonkin for the purposes of Slayer tasks, even though lore-wise this isn't accurate. So, if you are on a node-on Dragonkin Slayer task, then you can benefit from the Slayer Helm bonus like normal, and should definitely take advantage of that. I'll show a recommended inventory on screen right now. Similar to the equipment section, this is just indicative and is not prescriptive. First, I have a Holy Overload, but any overload variation is fine. If you don't have overloads unlocked, just bring your best combat potion. Second, I have Weapon Poison. Kerapac is poisonable, so bringing some kind of weapon poison will speed up kills. Then I have a Super Restore Flask. You will probably not need 6 doses and can get away with a 4-dose vial, but if you're learning, the kills might be a bit slow, so a flask is safer. Next, I have a Combat Familiar. You should bring your best DPS Familiar. Accuracy typically isn't a problem, so Nihils aren't recommended. I have Enhanced Excalibur for a little bit of free healing. I use it on phase 4. It's not essential, and you can replace it with more food if you don't have it. If you want, you can bring a shield for shield switching. It's not required either, but there are some situations where having the option to resonance or use other defensive abilities to build up adrenaline can become useful. For the rest, I have a mix of brews and food. I have Bellfish here, but if you're struggling, you could bring sharks or rocktails. You don't need brews. You can beat Kerapac with just food, or even without food at all. But when you're learning, having an inventory with some brews gives you a lot of flexibility to make mistakes and still get the kill. Tick eating a brew dose with food can get you out of some tight spots, and brews give a lot of HP per inventory slot. If you don't have overloads though, brews become a lot less useful because they'll drain your stats. Again, the exact inventory doesn't matter. You'll see at the end of the kill, I have a lot of resources still left. You can check the link to my wiki for alternative, more advanced setups as well, including switches and things like that. I've kept this inventory example pretty simple to make it more accessible for beginners. Onto the mechanics. Kerapac has 4 phases. Phases 1 to 3 are very similar, with only incremental tweaks that make the fight a little bit more difficult. In each phase, you cycle through a predetermined set of mechanics until you do enough DPS to shift Kerapac onto the next phase, and the pattern resets. Phase 4 has no real mechanics, and is just a DPS check. Let's start at the beginning with Phase 1. At the start of the fight, Kerapac will jump down into the arena and begin attacking you with Mage, so you should use the Protect or Deflect Mage prayer to lower the damage you take. Kerapac has a health bar of 200,000 HP, and you will move to Phase 2 once you damage him below 50k HP. In Phase 1, Kerapac has 3 mechanics in addition to his auto attacks. 3 mechanics are always the same and always occur in the same order: Shatter, Slam, and Lightning Waltz. In between each mechanic, Kerapac will use magic auto attacks. Okay, let's look at each of the special attacks in turn and how to deal with them. First off, Shatter. After making 3 auto attacks, Kerapac shouts, "I'll tear right through you." He raises his staff into the air and then slams it into the ground. As he hits the ground, he fires off a red, cloud-like rift towards your location. The rift does magic damage and stuns you. If you stay between the rift and Kerapac, you will continue to take magic damage with 100% accuracy. You can use Freedom to break the stun or anticipate beforehand. Alternatively, avoiding the attack using Surge also avoids the stun. I should mention the hitbox for this attack is not great, and sometimes you can get hit even if it looks like you've avoided it on your screen. The second mechanic is Kerapac's Slam attack. Kerapac shouts, "I'll put you in your place," or sometimes, "You will break beneath me," and jumps into the air. He then dives onto the player, rooting you in place and doing rapid melee damage with 100% accuracy. As normal, you can use Freedom to break the bind if it hits you. Praying Protect from melee will reduce the damage you take, so you should switch from Protect from Mage to Protect from melee. The best solution is to dodge the attack. The best way to do this is to use Surge or Bladed Dive if you have it available. The trick is to work out when to do Surge. 1 tick too early and Kerapac will home on to your new location. 1 tick too late and the attack will hit you before you Surge. I find waiting for Kerapac to raise his wings like this is the best way to work out the correct timing for Surge. If you get the timing right, you will take no damage. Instead, Kerapac will be rooted in place, and you're free to DPS him. Kerapac will then repeat this jumping attack 2 more times. If the attack doesn't hit you, then in addition to taking no damage, the cooldown or movement abilities like Surge, Bladed Dive, and Barge get reset. This means that if you're tick perfect every time, you can surge away from every attack. If you time it wrong, and you surge but get hit anyway, your cooldown will not reset. In that case, you'll have to run away to avoid the melee damage, which is a lot less good. A few things to note here. Firstly, Devotion, Debilitate, and Reflect do not reduce the damage you take from this attack, while the Praying Protect from melee works as normal. Confusingly, if the Devoted or Enhanced Devoted Invention perks trigger, then this does work, even though manually acting Devotion doesn't. I don't know why this is, but it does mean that Praying Protect from melee and having these perks can help you if you're not comfortable with the timing. Because the melee damage is very rapid, it's actually got quite a high chance of proccing your Devoted or Enhanced Devoted perks. Secondly, if you have the charged version of the Pontifex Shattering equipped, then you will not be bound by this attack, but will instead take damage from it like normal. If you're learning, I definitely take advantage of this, because otherwise you can take a lot of damage if the attack hits you, like in this clip, because you'll be unable to get out of the area of effect. I'll talk more about the Pontifex Shattering and its variations at the end of this video, as it's a little bit complicated. Third, if you're using melee, you can instantly barge back into Kerapac the tick after surging away. This will instantly bring you back into melee range and keep doing DPS while Kerapac is rooted in this clip. Assuming you correctly dodge the attack, you won't take any melee damage by coming back into range like this. After the third and final slam attack, Kerapac will make 3 magic auto attacks before moving on to the next mechanic. The third and final mechanic for phase 1 is the lightning wall. RuneScape has a lot of boss mechanics with dodgy hitboxes, and this is perhaps the worst. Kerapac yells, "Witness the power of the staff," and summons a wall of lightning that appears from a random direction and progresses across the arena. Lightning does between about 2,000 to 3,000 damage per tick of typeless damage if you're in it. Or honestly, sometimes just near it, because the hitbox lies. The best way to dodge it is to use Surge or Bladed Dive through the lightning wall and assume it's twice as wide as it appears on screen because, and I will say this again, the hitbox lies. I cannot emphasize enough that the hitbox for this attack is only vaguely related to what is displayed on your computer screen. If you do find yourself struggling to dodge this wall, you can also just run through it while tick eating a brew with some food. You'll only get hit for 1 or 2 ticks of damage, which is typically manageable. Unlike for his other mechanics, for this one, Kerapac will continue to attack you like normal. After 7 auto attacks, he will loop back to the first mechanic. He will do this indefinitely until you damage him below 50k HP. It's worth noting that it's entirely possible to skip mechanics if your DPS is good enough. For example, if you drop him to 50k HP before he summons a lightning wall, then he just doesn't summon it and skips straight to phase 2. On entering phase 2, Kerapac shouts, "No, I control the threads of time." He stops attacking for a few seconds and becomes invulnerable, or healing back to 200,000 HP. Although you can't damage him, you can still attack him to build adrenaline, or heal off abilities like Soul Split. Phase 2 is very similar to phase 1. He has exactly the same 3 mechanics which he rotates with in the exact same way. There are 2 differences. The first difference is there's now an Echo of Kerapac. Each time he uses a mechanic, he summons an untargetable clone of himself that mirrors the exact same ability, like in this clip for Shatter. The difference is the clone doesn't target where you are now, like the real Kerapac does. Instead, it targets where you were in phase 1. In general, you dodge the attacks in the same way as before, but you should take a look at where the clones are facing, as that will tell you where they're about to target. The Echo Kerapac works similarly for the slam attack as well, targeting where you were in phase 1, whilst the real Kerapac targets where you are now, like in this clip. Again, you should be using Surge to dodge this mechanic. The lightning wall is a little different. There's no clone, but instead he just summons 2 lightning walls. They again appear from a random direction each, and you dodge them in the same way as before, although if you get unlucky, dodging them can be quite difficult. The second difference in phase 2 is you gain the warp time ability via the extra action button. The extra action button is an interface that can be moved around the screen via edit mode if you don't like the default location, like in this clip. Obviously don't try doing this during the fight itself. When you click warp time, the game takes a snapshot of your current status. This includes your position, life points, adrenaline, prayer points, and ability cooldowns. After 10 seconds, warp time ends, and you get reset to your previous status. So you get teleported back to where you were when you originally used the ability, and your life points, adrenaline, prayer, and abilities also get reset. This is obviously massively powerful, as you can use all your best abilities, dump all your adrenaline on thresholds, ultimates, or defensive abilities, and then get all that adrenaline back, but also get the cooldowns reset. Getting used to how warp time works is one of the biggest learning curves at Kerapac, and if you master it, you will massively increase your DPS of this boss. Warp time has a cooldown of 30 seconds and can be used multiple times during the fight. Note, it is possible to use this ability very badly and actually hurt yourself. For example, if you use it when you have low HP and then eat food to heal, warp time will reset your HP to that lower value when it finishes, and you've wasted your food. Similarly, if you use it when you have low adrenaline and then build adrenaline during the ability, that adrenaline will be lost when you reset. Ideally, you want to wait until you have good HP, 100% adrenaline, and your most powerful abilities off cooldown. Then you use warp time, dump your adrenaline to max out your damage, and then after 10 seconds you get it all back, as well as healing any health you lost during that time period. Just like in Phase 1, once Kerapac hits 50k, he moves on to Phase 3. At the start of Phase 3, Kerapac shouts, "I can contain all its power," and just like for the previous phase transitions, he becomes briefly invulnerable. In Phase 3, the mechanics are identical to Phase 2, but now there are two echoes of Kerapac, which will target where you were in Phase 1 and Phase 2 respectively. You should avoid Shadow like before, using Freedom to avoid being stunned. For the slam attack again, you should use Surge to dodge this like before. If you can remember where you were in Phase 1 and Phase 2, and position yourself so you don't accidentally surge into the clones, that's obviously good to do, but even if you can't remember, it generally doesn't matter. The arena is quite big, and it's unlikely to line up unfortunately with where the clones are targeting. The lightning wall does become quite annoying in Phase 3 though. It has 3 walls now, and depending on how they line up, it can be very difficult to avoid all of them without taking damage. It is possible to use Surge or Bladed Dive, but it's tricky. Due to the random directions the walls come from, some combinations will be more difficult than others. Luckily, just getting hit for 1 or 2 ticks of damage isn't actually that big a deal, as long as you have decently high HP going into this bit. Additionally, just like in Phases 1 and 2, if you do enough DPS to take Kerapac below 50k HP fast enough, you won't have to deal with this mechanic at all. I've heard some players use warp time plus defensives like barricades to tank the lightning wall, but I personally don't recommend this. I feel warp time is much better used to maximize your DPS. Once you get Kerapac down to 50k HP for a third time, you enter Phase 4. At the start of Phase 4, Kerapac once again becomes briefly invulnerable, but this time, he only heals up to 75k HP. In Phase 4, Kerapac has no real mechanics, and he just hits you with magic attacks. He does start gaining stacks of Kerapac's Fury, which is a stacking enraged-like buff. He starts Stage 4 with 25 stacks, and gets 10 more stacks per attack, all the way up to 200. Each stack gives him 1% extra damage, and ignores 0.25% of your protection prayers. Given he gets the stacks 10 at a time, each auto attack he makes benefits from 10% extra damage, and reduces the effectiveness of your prayer by 2.5%. The exact numbers here aren't really that important. The critical thing to understand is you're now on a clock because eventually Kerapac's damage will become unmanageable. Basically, Phase 4 is a DPS race, but you do have some key advantages. Firstly, warp time is incredible here, both because you can dump your adrenaline twice in a row, but also because it will reset your HP. If you can start Phase 4 with high HP, high adrenaline and warp time off cooldown, it'll make the DPS race of Phase 4 much easier. Secondly, defensives are great here. Even though Kerapac's Enrage buff reduces the effectiveness of your protection prayers, Devotion is still 100% effective if you use it. This is especially great to use a little bit later in the phase, once Kerapac's damage gets dangerously high. So in general, the pattern I'd recommend for dealing with Stage 4 is the following. First, use the final parts of Phase 3 to build up your adrenaline, your HP, and to make sure that warp time is off cooldown. Next, take Kerapac below 50k HP and trigger Phase 4. Third, once you start damaging Kerapac, instantly trigger warp time and do as much DPS as possible and only eat food if you really need to. After 10 seconds, warp time ends and you get all your cooldowns, HP, and adrenaline reset. Next, with all your adrenaline back, you can either just focus on DPSing or, if you need to, use Devotion to prevent yourself taking any damage for 9.6 seconds. Combined with 10 seconds of warp time, This basically gives you 19.6 seconds of not taking any damage. Once Kerapac drops to 0 HP, the fight is over, and you will get to enjoy your loot. Now, let's do a full kill run through, so you can see how it all fits together. I'll speed through most of the fight because it's quite long. In the kill, I'm using gear and inventory similar to what I showed you as a minimum requirement in the recommended setup. At the start of the fight, I run across to where Kerapac is about to spawn, and I'm going to use Devotion, plus my protection prayer before the fight starts, just because it doesn't actually drain any adrenaline, so it's a free ability. And then I start DPSing. He's going to use his Shatter ability, so I use Anticipate and I run behind him. And then I just keep DPSing, keep using my abilities, and I wait for the next mechanic. Now it's Slam, so I wait for the right time, and then I use Escape, and I barge back in. Then I use Surge, and I barge back in, and then I'm going to use Surge again, and I'm going to barge back in again. I'll use Escape or Surge depending on where I think the space is. I used Escape for the first one because I didn't think there was enough space behind Kerapac to surge into. Now my DPS isn't good enough to avoid the lightning wall here, so I'm just going to surge through it. It's pretty easy to do in phase 1, and pretty soon he's going to be at 50k HP, and phase 2 is going to start. So I will keep attacking to build adrenaline. I'm going to drink some Cerebrew doses because at the start of phase 2, I will use Warp Time and my ultimate. Okay, I'm going to use Warp Time and my ultimate right now, right there, and in a minute or in a few seconds, Warp Time is going to finish. I snap back. Now I still have my ultimate up, but I now have all my adrenaline back, so I can really do some great DPS. Any damage I took from Shatter didn't even matter because my Warp Time reset my HP. Slam, it's the same as before. I'm going to use Escape because there's more space behind me, but it's the same as before, right? So use movement ability and then you barge back in. If I wasn't doing melee, I wouldn't barge back in. Once you get the timing down for this, it's actually pretty easy. Now again, I'm not going to be able to do enough DPS to avoid the lightning wall mechanic with this gear setup, except this time there's 2 walls. They're actually pretty well placed for me, so I could move through both with one surge, which is a bit lucky. And now phase 3 is going to begin pretty soon. So like before, I get my health and adrenaline up because I want to use Warp Time at the start of phase 3. Now it's going to be a bit tougher, because you're going to have multiple clones here. So I quickly will wait for the clones to appear. Now I look and I see where the space is, so I run in between the 3 clones. I use Anticipate so I don't get stunned, and there's because there was a nice spot, I stood there and I keep DPSing. So here, same as before, for the slam attack, I'm going to use Surge and barge to get in or out, or Escape, it depends what the space is. And yeah, the extra clones don't really change the mechanic actually. And pretty soon, there's going to be the lightning wall phase again, because I still don't have a DPS to skip it. And this time there's going to be 3 lightning walls, which is a lot trickier. So I see the first 2 walls there in front of me. There's one wall behind me off camera. I surge through it. I do get hit, but that's fine. And now I actually have double surge unlocked, so I can surge through this one as well, which I do. If I didn't, I have to run through it, but that's fine. Phase 4 starts, and Warp Time is back off cooldown, so I use Warp Time right at the start of Phase 4 to use my ultimate and really get my DPS in. And Warp Time ends, I heal up, and the next time my health gets low, I use Devotion, just like that. And that's it really, basically, right? By the time Devotion's over, Kerapac's going to be dead, right there. And 4 minutes 15 seconds for the kill time, and considering my gear is pretty bad, that's not too terrible. I used almost no resources. Obviously the Vampiric Scrimshaw did a lot of heavy lifting, but I think here, right, I've used like 1 potion and like maybe 1 piece of food or something. So really, normal mode Kerapac with average gear, not that difficult. I want to quickly cover the Pontifex Shadow Ring and its variants. The ring is a reward from the City of Sentencing quest. You obtain it by upgrading the Pontifex Observation Ring, itself a reward from a previous quest in the quest line at the Archaeology Bench. The ring has multiple bonuses, but the relevant ones for Kerapac are unlimited teleports to Sentencing Cathedral, in case you haven't unlocked the boss portal of War's Retreat yet, and the option to get Tier 1 Elder Troves when you kill Kerapac, at a rate of 5 per hour, which are a slight profit boost. The ring gets more interesting when you charge it with 1000 Anima of Jazz. You can buy this from the Grand Exchange, or obtain it from killing Dragonkin in the Elder God Wars, including Kerapac. After charging the ring like this, if you wear it during the Kerapac fight, it will no longer stun you if he hits you with his slam attack, although it still does full damage. This is a major quality of life buff for the fight, and I'd recommend using the ring if you're learning, as you will probably fail to dodge a slam multiple times. The ring can also be upgraded further though. Charging the ring with 1000 anima from the other 3 Elder Gods won't directly help you in fighting Kerapac, but it does incrementally improve the quality of the rewards you get from the Elder Troves by increasing their tier, as you can see from this table. It also increases the number you receive per hour. The ring can then be further enhanced by overcharging it with 5000 extra anima of each type. If you do this, then you no longer need to wear the ring to gain its benefits. You can leave it in your bank. You might think Jagex were done, but there's actually still one more way to upgrade the Matryoshka doll that is the Pontifex Shadow Ring. If you've completed the Extinction quest, a Grandmaster quest that is the culmination of the Elder God War storyline, then you can enrich the ring with the power of Erebus, creating the Enriched Pontifex Shadow Ring. This upgrades the ring in multiple ways, as shown on the screen here. But the key one we care about is a 2% bonus to unique drops at all Elder God Wars bosses, including Kerapac. You do need to wear the ring to benefit from this, unless you've overcharged it with anima, in which case you don't. There's a lot of information here, so I will leave a link in the description of this video to the Runescape wiki if you want to check and clarify anything. The last thing to touch on is the loot for Kerapac. In normal mode, Kerapac has 3 unique drops. Kerapac's wrist wraps, a pair of tier 85 magic power gloves, the Greater Concentrated Blast ability codex, which can be sold or read to unlock Greater Concentrated Blast. This is one of the most powerful magic abilities in game at time of recording. The Scripture of Jas, an enhanced version of the old god books which work for any combat style. If you kill Kerapac as a solo player, you get 3 loot rolls every kill. If you kill him as a duo, you get 1 loot pile each, and the 3rd loot pile goes to the player who did the most damage. And if you kill Kerapac as a trio, each player gets a single loot pile. I hope you found this guide useful. If you did, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment section. I read every single comment and I do my best to reply to all of them. Good luck with learning Kerapac and getting those drops.